I'm also a man of heart and blood and soul. Heart and blood and soul. Heart and blood and soul.
Vote for you bastards!
Heart and blood and soul. Heart and blood and soul. Heart and blood and soul.
God, I love it.
Hello and welcome to Devotee, the show where we talk to the creators we love about the stuff that they love. I'm Marion Blythe, and with me, as always, is my very own devotee, Lucas Testro.
Hello, Marion.
You see what I did there?
I know. Last episode, I made it about how great you were, and this episode, you made it about how great you were.
How great I am. Lucas, who are we chatting to today?
Today, we're joined by a singer-songwriter who's been the frontman for the bands Klinger, Ben Birchall and the Corrections, which kind of gives the game away, Ben, and Duke Batavia. He's a former breakfast radio host, a current ukulele player, a lifelong bee enthusiast, and a one-time nemesis of Ben Lee. It's Melbourne's own Ben Birchall. Hey, Ben.
Hi, Lucas. Hi, Marion. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
Now, when we were first speaking to you about coming on the show, you mentioned that you don't think of yourself as a musician, despite having 3 bands, several albums and EPs, and 2 Hottest 100 entries to your name. What do you think of yourself as?
I don't know. I'm a dilettante, essentially. And I used to have a real problem with that. And I think my dad is a kind of real working class guy, and a really intelligent guy, and he kind of pulled himself up by his bootstraps and went to teachers college because he grew up poor in Coburg, and the only way he could sort of get himself out of the cycle of poverty that he was in was studying, and he kind of has this real working class ethic. And I think he said to me once, is like, you don't want to be seen as a dilettante, somebody who just dabbles in things. And so I really resisted that for a long time, but I think I got to about 35 and I realised, no, I kind of am, and I'm okay with it. And weirdly enough, the world has changed around me in such a way that it's made me kind of more employable because I kind of do a bit of everything, and music is one of the things I do. And the reason I don't think of myself as a musician is because I've never really derived an income from it. And that has often really kind of burst some bubbles for people who've spoken to me, because
that's a sad reality for most artists.
It is.
If you even if you're lucky to make some money, I think a great rule of thumb is never work out what that comes to as an hourly rate.
Yeah,
because it's heartbreaking.
Isn't Taylor Swift changing all that for you now?
Well, yeah. Thank you, Taylor. God bless her. She's standing up for me. No, I mean,
it's one thing I always do when I go to see bands live or see photos of them. You can't help at a certain point you start just counting how many band members. I'm like, surely, like I go see Duke Batavia, I go, surely you could get away with fewer band members and get a bit more of that.
It's not like the ROI, as we say in the biz. The return on investment isn't great for Duke Batavia because there's like 6 of us, and we're usually making about $50 a show.
But the spiritual ROI,
absolutely through the roof. Yeah. No, I've never made money from music, and probably when I was at my unhappiest in my life is when I was trying to be a career musician, and that was towards the end of Klinger. And the band was kind of breaking up, and we were trying to get sort of management and get signed to a record label, and we had all this sort of weight of expectation, and that's probably what ended us in a sense. So I don't know.
So is it a struggle? Like, I can see how it could be liberating to go, you know what, I'm not going to worry about like assessing my worth as an artist depending on if I'm making money and all that sort of stuff. I'm doing my stuff.
Yeah.
But once you make that break, has it been hard for you to find that space to keep on creating that stuff, the work of love, when you're doing all this other work? And I mean, you've got a kid, and so family life, earning $1. Is it? How do you manage to still find that space to be creative?
It's interesting, and I was talking to my wife about it last night because I'm working on a Duke Batavia project at the moment, and I was telling her about it, and I had a email from a collaborator who said he was going to come on board and help with it. I got really excited, and she just sort of looked at me and she said, "How do you do all that stuff?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "How do you keep doing that stuff? Like, making music when you're so busy?" And I mean, I work full time at a creative studio, so my job is creative, which is a massive honor to be able to do creative stuff for a living. But then you often get sort of burnt out on having to come up with ideas all the time and writing for your job, and even just, I mean, there's a sense of performance about what you do when you're creative as well, because you're always trying to sell your idea and bring your idea to life and lead a team and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think the answer to how I keep doing it is I don't think about it, because and I've never stopped playing music since I was 14 years old. I don't think I've ever not had a gig booked or a band or a project that I was writing for, because I think if you stop that stuff, you start questioning it, and you start kind of like there's just a certain bravado that youth brings you. And so, what did I say? I was 14 when I was in a band called Broken Ground. I was probably 13 when I was in Broken Ground.
Is there a Tumblr of teenage band names? There should be.
Well, we were called Shocktopus for a while.
Wow, that was great.
I chose that.
Why would you dump that?
Well, I got voted down. Interesting, the drummer from Broken Ground now plays with Courtney Barnett, so I get to see Dave on Jimmy Fallon and all that kind of stuff.
I always had inclinations for super long names. Like, I was convinced it would be great to have a band called the Work Experience Love Gods. What do we think about that as a name?
That's awful.
It's, I'd say, in my bottom 5 band names of all time.
No Shocktopus, I'll tell you that.
But yeah, I'm the guy that came up with Shocktopus. You just don't question your creative output when you're 14.
But are you like scheduling time to go do the music, or you just sort of grab it when you have that
I grab it when I have the chance. And, sometimes I'll go a month without picking up a guitar or a uke or having a sing. But, we find that, like, we sort of just try and bake it into our lives, all of us, So if there's a party coming, I've played 2 Duke Batavia shows this year, proper shows. One was the bass player's mum's 60th and parents' 40th wedding anniversary, and the other was a friend's wedding. And both of those opportunities were just like, oh, great. Well, that means we get together and we play, and we, wrote new songs or figured new things out for them. You just kind of, you take it where you can get it. And I don't know. It's I can't stop. I don't know why.
Duke Batavia is a really interesting case to look at when you're talking about having a lot of different skills, because on its surface you can go to the gig and it's just a band playing like any other band playing, but you've actually created this whole sort of narrative or story world that kind of lies beneath what the band is, this framework for it. So tell us about the Duke, and how did the idea for that approach come about?
I maintain that Duke Batavia, as much as I'm really lucky to have the musicians that I have playing with me, because they're amazing musicians, I think it's a better idea than it is a band. Yeah. And I think it's not really cut out for playing in pubs. And that's probably why we're not kind of chasing gigs at the moment, is we sort of got a bit frustrated by it. But what it is the idea is that we are a bunch of Melbourne musicians who play, early rock and roll and doo-wop, and we're just enthusiasts. We're devotees, if you like. And we've stumbled across the music of a guy called Duke Batavia, which is a pseudonym of a Dutch Indonesian sailor, lover, fighter, scoundrel, who was active playing music around the South Pacific while he was sort of sailing on, not sailing as in like yacht rock, but like working on commercial vessels throughout from about 1950 to 1967, when he died of septicemia in a hotel room in Baltimore in the United States.
Wow. It's the details.
It's that old story.
What is kind of cooked into that idea is the melting pot of music of the South Pacific. He's Dutch Indonesian. He was as a Dutch citizen, he was basically expelled from Indonesia in 1946 when Indonesia achieved independence. So he was kind of stateless, but also because of all the music coming through the South Pacific during World War II, he was really aware of blues music. He was really aware of kind of like the nascent doo-wop and all that kind of stuff. And all that stuff is based in fact. And there's a whole bunch of bands that ended up in Holland in the early 60s, late 50s, early 60s, and they were the best rock and roll bands in the world at the time. And the music later became known as Indo-rock when it was kind of revived in the 70s and 80s. The way that kind of, the Beach Boys were playing kind of this revival rock, and, the people like I don't know, Rick Nelson and stuff were kind of reviving early rock and roll in the 70s. These Indonesian guys did as well, and they kind of retrospectively created a scene around it. But they were amazing musicians. You see footage of, there's particularly a band called the Tielman Brothers who were from Java, where Duke Batavia is from. And they were playing on German TV in 1959, and they are just the hottest rock and roll band you've ever seen. They're like playing with their teeth behind their heads. They're standing on the double bass. They're playing guitar licks with, like, you know, the drummer's playing the guitar strings with his sticks, and they're like, you look at it, and it's like it's 1958, so 59 or whatever it was. It's like, okay, so 4 years ago, Ike Turner wrote Rocket 88. Like, we're not far past rock around the clock here, and these guys are just tearing it apart in a way that you don't expect to see until the late 60s.
Is this stuff on YouTube? Is it easy?
Yeah, the Tillman Brothers, Rollin' Rock is probably the song that they really let it go. So definitely. So
we'll find some of those and check out on our Facebook.
So there's kind of, you know, there's truth to the Duke story, and you know, how I came to it is that my grandfather is Dutch Indonesian, and he was a musician, and in a musician in a way that he played in a wedding band with his brothers in Indonesia in the late 30s called the Birchall Hawaiian Boys, and he used to sort of tell me stories and play me songs, and he passed away in 2010, and I had a ukulele, and I'd never really learnt to play it, and when he died, I kind of thought, well, this is I really have to do this. So I figured out how to play one of the songs that he always used to play me, which was just kind of like their signature tune, the Birchall Hawaiian Boys, and just like Somewhere Over the Rainbow, something that just had a few chords so I could sing it at his funeral. And after I kind of picked up the few chords that I needed, I started writing songs on it, and within about, I don't know, I think it felt like it only took me about a month to write essentially the Duke Batavia set that, you know, we've only really added maybe another 6 or so songs to that in the last 4 years, because the idea was just kind of there.
The captain's alive. There's a hand in his pocket and he's dressing in style. There's a boat in the river for the sugar tonight. I could try and attract it like a moth to a fever blade.
When we were devising our lists of our wish lists of guests for this show, you were on mine not only because I was a big fan of you on the radio, which was where I first heard of Ben Birchall's existence, but because Duke Batavia does one of my favourite all-time songs, not just a song that's really, really good, but is legitimately in like my top 10 songs of all time.
Oh, that's mental.
Wide, Wide World.
I hate you like a sister, but then I love you like a friend. There's nothing wrong with a little fight if we make up in the end. Oh, it's a wide, wide world. It's a wide, wide world. It's a wide, wide world. You're trying to find a girl, but the horizon curves on and on.
The thing that's awesome about it is it's like the uke kind of quiet, beautiful moments at the start, and then it builds and it creates this gorgeous kind of story, and it fills into this space and just becomes something quite epic by the end of it.
Yeah.
What's the story writing, like what's the process, the songwriting process? I'm even saying story writing process.
Yeah, it's like the nature of, even in Klinger, like a number of those songs from 15 years ago now, and they still stick in the mind. There's a real art to that, 3 to 5 minute kind of pop song.
And place names, you're into place names.
Yeah, I like tangible things. I usually start with a title of a song.
So before you got any idea of a tune or lyrics with the title?
Usually.
Wow.
Usually, because the way I write is that this is pretty standard. I think a lot of songwriters write like this. I just kind of come up with a bit of a chord progression that works for me, that drives a bit of melody, and then I just start sort of automatically singing. just whatever fits, So it helps if you've got a title to start with, then it kind of drives where you're going to automatically kind of go. And
so you essentially, at that point, have the tune and then you start just riffing notions around what that title is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and probably I'm really lazy at going and changing those automatic lyrics. Recently, I've sort of got to a point where I'm like forcing myself to do it. Sometimes they stay, and that like the first kind of cascade of words that come out of my head is the thing that becomes a song. I have a feeling Wide Wide World was one of those. I think it just... you know what I did do with that song? I forced myself to write another line on the end of the chorus. The chorus of that song is, it's a wide, wide world. You're trying to find a girl, but the horizon curves on and on. And I added... Yeah, originally it was like, it's a wide, wide world for a little girl. And this is a song that actually predated Duke Batavia, but it kind of fit into the universe kind of well because it was, he's a guy that travels the world and he's got a lot of ladies in his life. And the keyboard player from the Corrections, Matty Vale, I played him that song and he said, I really love that song, the story's all kind of really rich, but that line about it's a wide, wide world for a little girl doesn't work. And I was like, a little
but
bit
it rhymes,
peeved.
man.
Yeah, it works. And so he made me kind of question it, and I went away and played with the end of that chorus. And then that on and on ends up being kind of the hook in the song.
Yeah. Klinger is back together, playing after 15 years after you first broke through. Now, Klinger were one of those 90s bands, well, late 90s, early 2000s, that I think perfectly encapsulated this moment in Australian music. And it's like a bunch of fun young guys saying kind of fuck you to the world in the most polite way with this really sweet cheeky grin and, smiles all around kind of thing, and kooky film clips to match.
And I don't know what you've been thinking. Gotta know it, gotta know it. Hello, cool world, I'm taking over now. Hello, cool world, I'm taking over now. Who's a lucky boy?
What made you decide to bring that back?
It was just trying to kind of... I sort of mentioned it earlier. When Klinger ended, it didn't end very well. We weren't happy in ourselves. We weren't all friends at the end of it. And, for the most part, we were. There was just some kind of stuff that was hanging over. And to the point where I wouldn't listen to any music with overdriven, like distorted guitars and drums in it for probably 2 years. The closest I just couldn't listen to anything. Wow. And so when I did my solo EP, I was like, I wouldn't play electric guitar. And the producer's like, this song's kind of rocking. Why don't you just... I'm like, no.
Wow.
I play acoustic guitar now. I would only listen to So Much for the City by the Thrills, Her Majesty the Decemberists, Belle and Sebastian's Boy with the Arab Strap. They're the only albums I would listen to for a long time. I couldn't listen to Weezer. I couldn't listen to Sloan. I couldn't listen to UMI. All these great bands that I loved. I just kind of, I don't know. And then that all kind of wore off, and we realised that we're all still friends. We all kind of still played together in certain, two of the guys from Klinger ended up in the Corrections, and Dave Rogers, who's my kind of co-songwriter in Klinger and one of the creative forces, he and I was working together, and he filled in for Duke Batavia shows. So we were kind of all around, and so we just kind of went, let's get in a room, and if it feels fun and vital, we'll do it. And it did. So we could chat about Ben all night, but we are actually here to chat about the creator that you love. Yeah.
So, Ben, who or what have you chosen?
I have chosen Wes Anderson.
Are you getting divorced?
It doesn't look good.
Was it our fault?
Obviously, we made certain sacrifices as a result of having children, but no, Lord, no.
Well, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go on an overnight drunk, and in 10 days, I'm going to set out to find the shark that ate my friend and destroy it.
What's this thing you do, the whistle with the clicking sound?
That's my trademark. This is Madame D's last will and testament. To Monsieur Gustave H., I bequeath a painting known as Boy with Apple.
Wow. What? Who's Gustave H.?
I'm afraid that's me, darling.
What's the secret, Max?
The secret
I think you just gotta find something you love to do and then do it for the rest of your life. For me, it's going to Rushmore.
Sharp little guy. He's one of the worst students we've got.
Lucas's response when I said that you'd chosen Wes Anderson was just all capitals, holy shit.
But see, because Lucas, you're a big Wes Anderson fan. This scares me because I kind of feel, because I'm such a nerd, I kind of feel like I needed to prepare, like cram on my Wes Anderson and find the good stories.
I'm glad you did, because I've prepared this pop quiz that I'm going to. Question 1.
Oh, God.
Yeah, obscure
Owen
facts.
Wilson.
Obscure facts.
An archaeologist.
I was telling Ben I hadn't told Marion this. I actually originally had on today, in fact, my Life Aquatic T-shirt until I popped over to my mum's in the morning and she went, "Is that you that smells?" I'm like,
wow.
I don't think so. I've showered. This is a new shirt. But I was like, oh, God, I can't come into this.
She ruined it for you.
So I had to take it off.
Fine.
So what film was your introduction to Wes Anderson?
Rushmore. I missed Bottle Rocket, and I missed Rushmore at the movies. 2 of my best friends went and saw it, and they were just like, dude, you got to see this movie. It's amazing.
So how old are you at this point?
I guess 18, 17 maybe. What was it, like 90... What year did that film come out? 96 maybe?
98.
98, okay. So I was...
He's testing you
19.
already.
I was 19. And they'd gone to see it, raving about it. And I'd seen the preview and I kind of... At this point, I was pretty snobby about my film stuff. And I kind of saw it's a Bill Murray movie. Yeah, I mean, I loved Scrooged. Sure, Groundhog Day, whenever it's on TV every 2 weeks, I'll watch it. But I was like, I was very much into sort of auteur films at this point in a really uneducated way. Like I'd seen, I think when I was in year 12, I saw Clerks. My sister, I've got older sisters, and one of my sisters took me to see Clerks. And I stayed up all night, partly because I think we had a coffee at Mario's on Brunswick Street afterwards.
Wow.
And I've probably never had a coffee before. And I stayed up all night. And I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to write movies. And so I went off to writing school. I did professional writing at Deakin Uni. And one of the subjects was script writing. And I went into it going, I'm going to be a screenwriter. So I had this snobby kind of thing. But in a really uneducated kind of, as snobby as a 17-year-old from What's on Your North, who's only ever seen a couple of Tarantino films and maybe something by, Kevin Smith and Tarantino. That's all I knew. So I was like, I'm not going to see this film. Like, it's a Bill Murray movie. I'm past all that now. And so I think I saw it on video. I think finally my mate Ange sat me down and said, you have to watch Rushmore. Max Fisher is amazing. He's the greatest character, and he reminds me of us. And so I sat down and watched it, and it was just absolutely right. It was like, so motivated. And I don't know, my buddy Ange, who put me onto the film, we grew up together, and we used to have like little we had a club called Idiots United, and we had cards that we'd made up for it. This is when we were 10 or 12, and this is kind of I could see so much of us in Max Fisher. Like, he was so... A lot of the stuff he was doing was completely misguided, but he was so motivated, He's just so motivated.
Disturbingly so.
And, obviously I just fell in love with the world that Wes Anderson created, and that he continues to create. So what is it then? Moving beyond Rushmore and that one character that you're relating to, for his broader work, what is it that you think is special or sets him apart for you as a filmmaker? It is. There's 2 things. One is the attention to detail and creating these contained universes, which I think actually hit its peak for me in Fantastic Mr. Fox, when he could actually control the entire universe. You kind of go, this makes perfect sense. So there's that. I think just from an aesthetic perspective and an artistic perspective, and just a kind of, it's a pleasurable experience to kind of be in those worlds. The second thing he does, I think, is the level of kind of containment of the characters means that when the emotion bubbles up, it shoots up like a fucking volcano and just takes your eye out. And you get those moments, when Ben Stiller's character in Royal Tenenbaum says, it's been a rough year, and you just like,
I cry every time. Yeah, waiting for
it. Because you're so sort of contained, and if you're going to kind of make a link between that and music, it's like, you know, it's what an amazing use of dynamics. You know, that's like the Pixies right there. That soft, loud thing. It's
such a key thing that I think people overlook a lot of the time about his work. You see those the Wes Anderson doing whatever the movie of the month is that people are obsessed with, and it is all the externals of that production design.
Yeah.
And what they miss is he sets up these artificial, eccentric worlds, but the level of empathy he has for the characters is absolutely uncompromising.
Yeah.
And it is these, you know, really extraordinary characters dealing with super ordinary troubles.
Yeah. And I think the level of artifice on the characters is completely almost inverse to what you feel for them. So like Richie Tenenbaum, what a ridiculous character, really.
Yeah,
he's a former pro tennis player who's basically dressed like Bjorn Borg. Like, it's completely unbelievable. And Margot Tenenbaum is like a cartoon of a angst-ridden muse. But that moment between them when they say, I guess we'll just have to keep, what is it?
In the tent, just secretly be in love with each other forever.
Be in love with each other forever. And you're just like, it doesn't matter how artificial this world is, like, that is real. Or, you know, the scene when...
Yeah, or the tennis match meltdown that is absolutely... We should say at this point, if you haven't seen these films, there's going to be spoilers.
Sorry.
Anyway. But it's the most absurd kind of
absurd.
kicking
it's broad,
off his shoes
it's broad
and stuff,
comedy.
and you just feel for it. It's so raw.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, the broad comedy of that setup juxtaposed with, like, that scene with Needle in the Hay and... sorry, spoiler alert. When he slashes his wrists, it's like, holy shit! What are you putting us through? You know. So I think Tenenbaums was the film that really put it over the edge for me, and I think it's probably still my favorite Wes Anderson movie. As much as it's like, you know, Rushmore's my first love, and then I went back and loved Bottle Rocket, and you know, just fell in love with the character of Dignan, and he's like, you know, who you kind of really secretly want to be. But yeah, Royal Tenenbaums, it's just like, man, what a movie.
You just mentioned Needle in the Hay. The music in his films is so perfectly curated. Talk about playlisting like a boss. He's like the Kinks, Velvet Underground, Rolling Stones, Bowie, Dylan, The Clash, Nico, The Who, Cat Stevens. I can't even. It's a lot. So how important is the music in his storytelling for you?
Oh, so important. And it's really telling that each film has a different texture musically as well. Like, I've heard the story that he chose British invasion music for Max Fisher because, you know, the Kinks and you know, Creation and those kind of bands are on there. They always wore blazers and, you know, suits on the cover of their records and looked quite held together. But then you listen to the music and they were just like this just maelstrom of chaos, which is exactly what Max Fisher was like. He was, you know, in his school blazer and all that kind of stuff. But there was just an explosion of just misguided love and hate and anger inside him. And, you know, to a film like Bottle Rocket used jazz really well, which kind of really juxtaposed with these really white idiots. And, you know, the Nico in the Royal Tenenbaums and even things like the Grand Budapest Hotel. I can't think of the name of the composer, but it's like, yeah, I mean, he's like visually creates these worlds, but each film's got their own world.
I think it's
musically.
interesting too that they're all, for the most part, he's very interested in kind of period songs. They're not contemporary. And I think that links back possibly to that whole notion of the empathy under it. Like, it's coming in the 90s, and I kind of feel like it's a response to the 90s were all about that kind of self-aware irony and Tarantino and stuff, which was a lot about distancing the characters from the audience and you know, like, it's the same sort of era like the Simpsons celebrated with that Homopalooza. Like, he's so cool. Are you being sarcastic? I don't even know anymore.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, we're going to take that same self-awareness, but as a starting point and actually tell stories where you engage. And so I think it's interesting that, you know, you're in the era of like Nirvana and that kind of stuff, and instead they're hearkening back to that earlier stage. I think it's also part of hearkening back to childhood. It's kind of pop psychology here.
I think
there's so much
nostalgia. I mean, there's so much nostalgia in those. It's
like a recovery of a child.
I'm a pretty nostalgic person. Even when I was in Klinger, I was 19 years old writing songs about being a 10-year-old.
Wow.
Like, yeah, I was nostalgic at 19. I got a song called 20 that I wrote when I was 19, going, 20 is so close, and it terrifies me. No more dreams of John Cusack and me in a teenage movie.
Wow.
You know, I was nostalgic at 20. How do you do that? Maybe that's why I love Wes Anderson. I don't know.
You just got a lot of heart.
I'm just going to lay down on the couch and you guys just analyse the shit out of me.
I don't. I'm not a crier, and I don't cry in films at all. But I was listening to you because you posted that playlist on Twitter the other day of Wes Anderson.
Yeah, I listened to probably about an hour and a half of Wes Anderson.
Good God. And
soundtrack.
But when I hear Nick Drake's Fly, even though I get misty-eyed, but it's linked to that moment in the film where Richie Tenenbaum is on the bus and he's sitting by himself on the seat at the back of the bus. And
after he's just checked himself out of the hospital.
Yeah, and it's just like this beautiful, perfectly sad moment, and that song just pops it into my head. So what's your favourite music moment in a Wes Anderson film?
I think it's probably Ooh La La at the end of Rushmore. That's a kind of sensation that my wife Sophie and I kind of talk about, is like if you go to a friend's wedding and or like, you know, someone's party, or like, you know, you have this beautiful moment where everyone's dancing and there's this beautiful song and your heart's filled with joy. She's like, man, what a great wedding. How good was that Rushmore moment?
Wow.
You know, that's kind of something that's always stayed with both of us from that film.
Oh, that is really lovely. If you could have a theme song in your life that just, like, you know, whenever you needed it, just started playing, what would your theme song be?
It would be London Calling by The Clash.
Oh, wicked.
Yeah.
Joe Strummer, you were saying to me, is another person you're a big fan of.
Yeah.
The Clash also feature quite often in Wes Anderson.
Yeah,
big time.
Rock the Casbah and Police and Thieves are both in Royal Tenenbaums, I think. There's something about Joe Strummer, and maybe there's a parallel between Joe Strummer and Wes Anderson, maybe, in a way that they don't do things by halves, either of them. They just can't commit to a world. Wes Anderson commits to a world, just even in the way he lives, in the way he dresses. Can you imagine seeing him not wearing a beautifully turned out kind of, but slightly shabby blazer or like a tan-coloured suit.
Tan suit and the scarf.
Yeah. And in the same way, you know, you see photos of Joe Strummer having run the Paris Marathon in 1982 wearing a leather jacket over his running shorts. You know?
Amazing.
The people that just kind of commit to that world. I've always, you know... I've always respected people that can do that. I can't quite do it.
It's interesting you talk about like going your own way, and Joe Strummer wearing those leather jackets, because like I feel Wes Anderson films are very strongly kind of outsider movies in a couple of ways. There's a sort of more latent theme in the earlier films that has become bigger, I think, if you look at like Grand Budapest Hotel, of these characters who kind of oppose mainstream societal values, and so they end up creating their own parallel world with all of these like intricate rituals and codes of honor involved in it. But then much more, especially in the earlier films, and for me, the films of his that work better, I feel like really embrace these themes stronger, is his films so often tend to be about these emotionally repressed characters who are kind of coveting entry into a world that's barred from them. And like often it's Owen Wilson's characters will regularly be playing that, whether it's in Bottle Rocket, Dignan's like wanting to be a part of Mr. Henry's gang, crime gang, and then Rushmore, Max Fisher in a way is desperately trying to get entry into this world of kind of like cultural sophistication, and in another way he's trying to get entry into the world of Rushmore. Like he does all of these clubs and stuff like that, but really he hangs out with kids far younger than him. No one at Rushmore seems to like him at all.
And he's the odd one out.
Yeah, and then Eli Cash in Tenenbaums talks about how he always just really wanted to be a Tenenbaum. So I find that interesting then, thinking about that in the context of you loving these movies as this kind of, let's face it, outrageously handsome lead singer in a band who always seems very at ease. Is there like a tortured outsider
of course there
somewhere
is.
Inside Ben Birchall?
Of course there is. And that's, I mean, yeah, of course there is. I don't think anybody in no, God, no. I was like I was saying, you know, me and my best mate Ange were totally Max Fishers. Like we were total outcasts, total nerds. In some ways, like, we committed to these little worlds that we created in a really kind of Wes Anderson way. Yeah, that's I still feel like that. I never feel at ease.
Is there other things about his films that resonate to you, or is that like the strongest thing?
I guess I've never dissected it, But yeah, there's all of that. There's family is, so powerful. The relationships between, Max and his dad. And,
Absolutely.
And all of the Tenenbaums.
I think there's two, so they're always wanting to get in these worlds, and there are these weird worlds that they do. And I think that's partly about the production design as well. It's like it's fetishized in a way that somebody who can't get into that world, only they would do. And I feel like they're all, to one level or another, metaphors for family. And again, this is getting back to the pop psychology. This is a guy, he went through a divorce. Royal Tenenbaum started as a film that Owen Wilson suggested he should write about his brother's experience of a divorce. And those worlds are all these worlds that are kind of like things that children would like. They're like inventors and explorers.
And sometimes with literally children in them, something like Moonrise Kingdom, which is probably the most direct of the experience of almost like Where the Wild Things Are or something like that. Like these sort of children out in this big bad world. But
again, as you say, then about a kid fundamentally then who doesn't have a family and whose foster parents then abandon him, and then him having to kind of re-find his family with Bruce Willis's character.
Yeah. I think it's just the kind of, I'm doing this on the fly here because honestly I haven't really dissected why I love them so much. Partly it's just those little moments where you kind of just enjoying something on an aesthetic level, and then it just clubs you with this emotion. And I don't know why they get me so much, because I know that there's a whole bunch of people that they don't get, and they never sort of break through to those moments, and they just see them as these studied, very white, very mannered kind of set pieces. But for some reason, every one of his films gets me, and including Fantastic Mr. Fox. I can just cry my eyes out on that film.
That's weird. I didn't really like Fantastic Mr. Fox.
I love that one.
Yeah. Maybe I didn't give it I feel like I have to rewatch it now.
My thing, I have this real clear trajectory of him where I like his films more and more and more till we get to Tenenbaums, which is like my favourite film ever, and then progressively less, to the point where I had just started to think maybe Wes Anderson films aren't for me anymore when Grand Budapest came out.
I didn't like Darjeeling Limited.
Yeah.
I didn't like it. I mean,
I kind of wonder, I feel like there's a couple of things I wonder about, like whether these outsider films and then suddenly he's getting more and more successful each film, and whether he was struggling with that nature of, well, he's not the outsider anymore, he's an indie darling.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, I sometimes wonder, I think one of the interesting things about him as this guy who's so associated as having this singular vision is that all of his films are co-written.
Yeah.
And I do wonder whether that has more influence than you would have thought to start with, because the films that I all really liked are the first three that he co-wrote with Owen Wilson, and then Life Aquatic and Fantastic Mr. Fox he co-wrote with Noah Baumbach, and I like those, but they're a little more problematic. And then the films that he's done with Roman Coppola, which is Moonrise Kingdom and Darjeeling, not so much. And now he's got this, he shares a story credit for Grand Budapest with Hugo Guinness, but he wrote it himself.
Yeah,
the screenplay.
I didn't realize. That you could be hitting on something there, because they're probably Moonrise Kingdom and Darjeeling Limited are the two films that just didn't really do it for me.
Have you done much co-writing in your own work?
Yeah, not a hell of a lot. Usually,
do you find it changes the character of the work from when you're writing on your own?
Yeah, definitely. Partly because I'm a very rudimentary musician, and so usually when I co-write, I choose people. I say I'm not handpicking people. It's the people that I'm writing with who are better musically. Dave Rogers, who is in Klinger with me, he is the best natural musician I've ever come across in my life, and he can play any instrument sort of beautifully. So that's a really obvious choice, because I just run out of chords sometimes, and that's why I picked up the ukulele. And I'd run out of chords, I'd run out of moves on guitar. I was like, I got no more moves. I don't know. I'm doing this descending run on the C again. I got to stop doing that. So I usually collaborate with people who are better than me musically. I mean, which isn't hard to find anyway. But recently, I've done some other tricks. Like I wrote a song the other day, and then I did that automatic singing thing, and then I was like, it's kind of boring. I just can't think of anything. So I flicked over to my friend John, who plays lap steel in Duke Batavia, and I was like, write me some words. And he wrote the words for me and sent it back, and I was like, cool, all right, good. I might do that more often. I'll just sort of outsource the thinking. I was like, I got nothing to say. You write me something. He wrote this amazing song called The Sensibles. And the chorus says, let's forget about the sensibles and fall into a drink together. let's not defend the indefensibles. Let's fall into a glass forever. Which,
wow.
Yeah, it was kind of like, all right, yeah, good work, Palmer.
But it's also like, and it inspires you to make great work as well when you're working with people who are really
I'm
talented.
incredibly competitive. Like, I'm incredibly competitive with the people that I'm in bands with. And we all are. Like, we're always trying to best each other. And we support each other. We love each other. But it's like, Rogers puts out an album, I'm like, oh, fucking hell, he's just done another mini symphony. I've got to sit down and do something with this thing. And, you know, it's the same deal.
It's good. It makes
I think you see that in their world too, where like now Bound Back Went Off
those
and
guys
Squid
would
and
be,
the Whale. It
oh
was
my God,
like another amazing
yeah.
film, and then
they would. I mean, you know, just the trajectory of Owen Wilson as a movie star. Like, what would that do to you as Wes Anderson? Those kind of things.
It is weird what like the shitty films that he has been in, and he created those three. You know, like he was part of those three masterpieces.
You got to pay the bills, Mary.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
We normally would end up by asking about like a favourite movie, but we've already covered that. I wonder, should we do favourite movie if it wasn't Royal Tenenbaums, or should we maybe go for what is our favourite moment in a Wes Anderson film?
Sure.
Yeah? Go, Ben.
Favourite moment in a Wes Anderson film? Yeah, I think it's the end of Rushmore. I think it's just like, you know, I'm a soppy guy and
sucker for a slow motion.
Absolute sucker for it. It gets me every single time. You guys?
Oh, do you know what? I'm really morbid, and mine is actually Richie in the bathroom needling the hay.
Wow, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's an amazing scene.
Moment. And the little
just so
montage they
good.
do there of the quick, like his flashbacks that he had.
And the slow-mo of Margot coming off the bus, and just the blue in that. Like,
which is interesting because I noticed today I was watching Life Aquatic, and they do a very similar thing the moment the helicopter crashes when Ned, Steve Zissou's son, ends up dying. But Steve Zissou has this flash that's water and red, and then the little moment of the zoom from his perspective when he's in the concert hall at the start and Ned first raises his hand to ask a question.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Little crash zoom thing.
Mine would probably be that same moment you were talking about earlier, Ben, where Chaz in Royal Tenenbaums says it's been a rough year, Dad. But since you've already said it, I'll say my other favourite moment, and it would be a crime to do a Wes Anderson movie and not mention this man, is the moment in Bottle Rocket where Kumar, the great Kumar, who goes through...
God rest his soul.
Exactly. Where, who's a member of the gang.
That's Applejack.
He's been in a number of scenes in the gang. That's it. They're in the lift, and then Kumar turns to Owen Wilson's character, Dignan, goes, who's that guy?
That's Applejack.
And you just go, this plan is not going to go well. Do you know, one of the other of the sort of ensemble cast that Wes Anderson keeps around, like Seymour Castle's in heaps of films as well, but there's that guy who's got like, he looks kind of like Jeff Goldblum, but he's not Jeff Goldblum, with black curly hair and a monotone voice. He plays the teacher at the start of Rushmore, who's done the Good Will Hunting style equation on the board, and he's Royal Tenenbaum's doctor, and I think he's in the book story in Bottle Rocket. He's Kumar's real life son.
Whoa.
Fun facts with Destro. I have two things that we need to tie, like before we tie things up.
Okay.
One, have you met Ben Lee?
No. Can I tell you a story though?
Yes, please.
Oh, yeah, I skipped that.
Yeah, Lucas was like,
I had this great moment.
I wonder what.
Can I say, because this is what I was going to say. We could edit back in, but we won't even do that. We'll do because it was the thing I was thinking about being an outsider. Is you got this film, this song Ben Lee, that is all about essentially, you know, wanting to be a part of this world that you're banned from.
You got the song. Thanks. I was never. It was a poor choice to release it as a single. We did it really...
Is this why that it essentially doesn't exist on the internet anymore? Like, you can't hide it. It was in the Hottest 100.
It is a kick-ass song, though.
It's a great song.
I don't think we've ever... we'll put it up on iTunes. I got the codes and stuff. It was... Yeah, I mean, we were just trying to get played on Triple J. It was as simple as that, and it worked. We sent them a burnt CD. Actually, we handed it to Arnold Frollows, I think it was still. It wasn't Richard Kingsmore yet, who was the music director of Triple J. We gave him a burnt CD, and that afternoon it was on, and it was like high rotation straight away.
He wishes he was just like him. He's lucky and genetically thin. He wakes up next to movie stars, and they get with him, but that's not everything. Punk rockers go to see him play. a bath with him. And you're lucky that you met me, because I'm arrogant like Bentley.
So it worked, but
it's interesting because it's satirical and it's as much about you wanting to be as funny as it about him.
Yeah,
but there must have been some point.
I call him arrogant in the chorus. It's not.
He could be anyone.
It's not flattering,
right?
but I'm a fan of Ben Lee, and I love that Breathing Tornadoes record. I just didn't think about what it would mean.
So there wasn't that moment thinking I'm still saying some pointed things about a real person.
Yeah, I just didn't think about it. I was too young. I was too stupid. Our producer beforehand said, "Do you really want to get into this?" I was like, it's fine. But can I tell you something hilarious? I've been talking a lot about Dave Rogers, who was in Klinger. Mm-hmm. He now plays guitar for Ben Lee. And he says it's never come up in conversation, so he hasn't told Ben that he was in Klinger and kind of arranged that song. But
so you've never met him despite having...
I've not. I was going to go and see him the other night. He played at the Northcote Social Club and I couldn't go, and I would have met him that night.
Have you rehearsed what you'll say when the moment comes?
I'd just say, dude, I was 21 and
But you know what?
stupid.
You probably gave him a few new listeners because people would be like, who the fuck is Ben Lee? Googled him and went, that's actually a great song.
He's pretty good.
I don't think there were many people going, who the fuck is Ben Lee at that point in time.
It's true. It's
Claire Danes' boyfriend. We all knew that.
That was one thing. My other thing, you said that you were working on a Duke Batavia project. Where is the album? Give us an album.
Okay. Is the project the album or is it something bigger or something different?
The project's something different. The album is...
Is it a pirate movie with Wes Anderson? Because that would be amazing.
It's a biopic of Joe Strummer that Wes Anderson is directing with music by Duke Batavia.
Holy shit.
No, it's... I can't jinx it too much, but it's an expansion of the story of Duke Batavia. Obviously, it's all kind of been running around in my head and spills out between songs, usually yelling over people spilling beer on themselves. And I just don't, I don't think we're a pub band, and I don't think releasing just the album is really going to get the right listeners.
No, that's amazing that you're going to do
is it like a
doing something with
two disc style rock opera a la like Jeff Wayne's War of the World?
I don't know what it's going to be yet. I know that it's doing something with the story and slotting the songs into it. I don't know, and I've got a collaborator just come on board. I can't say who it is, but it's I just don't want to jinx it because it's such early doors.
Klinger's headed to the Newtown Social Club, very cool venue on is it the 1st of August?
1st of August, Saturday night, we're playing with some great bands. The Suits from Frankston, a band called Introverse are getting back together. There's basically nothing of them on the internet. They were an amazing Sydney band.
Wow.
We were on a compilation CD with them called 710 Split that Rubber Records put out in 1999, I think it was, or maybe 2000. So if you ever find that in a secondhand record store, buy it. Not for the Klinger songs, but for the Introverse songs.
So if you're in Sydney, get along to it. If you're not in Sydney, you're shit out of luck. But you can look forward to the Duke Batavia mystery project.
Mystery project.
Thanks for joining us, Ben.
Thank you, guys.
Where can people wanting to track down your work or get updates about this mystery project find you on the internet?
BenjaminBirchall.com is my website. There's not a lot of music on there at the moment, but I'll fix that. It's mainly kind of writing projects and things. Or Duke Batavia on at Duke Batavia on Twitter, at Klinger Music on Twitter, or on either of those groups on Facebook as well.
And you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at Devotee Podcast, or email us at devoteepodcast@gmail.com.
And you should probably drop by and post your favourite Wes Anderson scenes, and we'll also be posting up links and stuff to Ben's work, so there'll be lots to check out there till we meet back here next month when another of our favourite creators will drop by to nominate their favourite thing, and we'll do it all over again. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.
Thank you through me.